My name is Bria Powell, and alongside my colleagues Chloe, Colin, and Charlie, we explored the recovery of Point Pleasant Park following Hurricane Juan in 2003. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this research was conducted in the Place of Spirits, or Amntu'kati, which we have come to know as Point Pleasant Park. Located at the southern tip of Halifax Peninsula, this urban green space is a part of Mi'kma'ki, the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq peoples. Now let's explore the changes we have seen in the park over the past few decades, from destruction to renewal, tracking secondary succession in Amntu'kati. What is secondary succession? It is the gradual natural recovery of an ecosystem after a disturbance occurs, like a hurricane or forest fire, that removes vegetation but leaves the soil intact. During this process, plant and animal communities slowly rebuild, diversify, and shift over time. The final stage is the climax community, a stable and mature ecological state where species composition remains relatively constant until the next disturbance comes around. This stage represents the long-term outcome of secondary succession when an ecosystem regains richness, diversity, and stability. To understand how an ecosystem reaches this climax state, we use community metrics. Species richness describes how many different species are present in an area, while species evenness reflects how evenly individuals are distributed. Together, these two components form the Shannon Diversity Index, denoted as H' in our research, which is a measure of biodiversity and balance that helps quantify forest recovery and how close it is to reestablishing a stable structure. These concepts are relevant when considering the impact Category 2 Hurricane Juan had on Point Pleasant Park, a part of the Acadian forest region composed of species such as red spruces, red maples, balsam firs, and yellow birches. Hurricane Juan made landfall in Nova Scotia on September 29, 2003, bringing wind gusts exceeding 185 kilometers per hour. Point Pleasant Park, located just over 20 kilometers from where Juan made landfall in Prospect, suffered catastrophic canopy loss, estimated at about 75%, leaving the park in a near banned state. It is also important to recognize that the Acadian forest, including Point Pleasant Park, holds a great cultural significance for the Mi'kmaq peoples. Their teachings emphasize balance and respect, offering valuable perspectives that complement scientific approaches to long-term forest recovery. Now that we've covered secondary succession and Hurricane Juan's impact, we can look at how Point Pleasant's forest community has shifted over the past 20 years. Today, early to mid-successional species like red maple and white birch dominate the park, while later successional conifers such as red spruce are slowly returning, showing the forest's progression through succession. Our overall objective was to track how Point Pleasant's forest community has changed over time and what these changes tell us about its successional recovery. To do so, we hypothesized three things. For our first question, we predicted that the total tree density would continue to increase as the forest moves towards a later successional, more stable state. For dominant species, we expected red spruce density to rise more slowly than red maple as the forest gradually shifts away from early successional hardwood dominance. And finally, using the community metric of species evenness, we predicted that evenness would steadily decrease from 2004 to 2025 as the species becomes more dominant over time. These objectives guided our analysis, which we'll walk you through in our methods next.
From the years 2004 to 2025, apart from 2005, 2007, 2016, and 2020, the data has been collected at the same sites each year, which were picked based on where Hurricane Juan had the most impact. A 20-meter by 20-meter quadrant was set up at each site. A number of trees and species were recorded. The diameter at DBH, which is 4.5 feet and stands for diameter at breast height, was measured for each tree greater than 2.5 centimeters using a D-tape. Only trees that had a diameter of 2.5 centimeters or more were measured because, according to the Natural Resources Canada, a tree only surpasses the seedling stage and is considered a tree when the diameter DBH is greater than 2 centimeters. The raw data was gathered into Excel, where it was transformed into the 7 metrics we used to analyze the data from all 6 sites. Using this data, scatter plots were created and linear regression analysis was used to test whether there was a significant relationship to time in years. A scatter plot was used due to there being multiple sites for every year and these sites not being related to each other. The total density from 2004 to 2025 has increased as shown by the upward sloping trend line, indicating that there is a constant rise in the total tree density. The graph predicts that the tree density will continue to increase and hasn't started approaching its community climax, as the graph shows no indication of plateauing. This aligns with our hypothesis 1 that states that the forest community will continue to grow. In early years of observation, the total tree density was extremely low, between 0 to 10 individuals per 400 meters squared. As time progressed, there was a visible increase in density, particularly after 2010, where the total tree density increases to 7 to 70 individuals per 400 meters squared. Although there is a great amount of interannual variation, the regression line has a slope of 7.9285, indicating only an annual average increase of approximately 8 trees per 400 meters squared per year. The R-squared value of 0.4485 indicates that nearly half of this variation is due to time alone. The observed increase in the total tree density is characteristic of secondary succession following a disturbance such as Hurricane Juan. The jump in density is likely due to seedlings and saplings establishing themselves rapidly due to increased access to light and reduced competition. As the young trees grow, canopy infilling occurs, leading to reduced light for trees underneath and increased competition. While self-thinning occurs, the overall trend still remains upwards because growth and recruitment of new trees still exceeds mortality. As the overall community moves towards its climax community, the total tree density will level off at a sustainable level where recruitment and self-thinning become relatively equal. The community will begin to move away from high levels of recruitment and move towards maturity. The early stages of recovery were dominated by fast-growing tree species such as the red maple. As the canopy closes, the community climax is approached. These species will likely be replaced by more shade-tolerant, slow-growing species like the red spruce. These predictions arise from likely increase in competition for resources. The slow-growing species like the red spruce tend to accumulate slowly due to slow growth rates and long juvenile periods, but allow the community to stabilize.
Next, we determined how the population density of the red spruce trees has changed over time. This change will then be interpreted to see if it fits the hypothesis stated in slide 4. As demonstrated by the graph, there is a weak positive relationship between current year and red spruce density, allowing us to reject the null hypothesis and accept the hypothesis. The red spruce was the dominant species of 2004 due to their resilience, allowing mature trees to withstand extreme conditions more favorably than the smaller, more vulnerable to disturbance red maple trees, leading to more surviving red spruce trees. Due to their slow rate of reproduction, red spruce trees are quickly usurped as dominant species by the faster sprouting and maturing red maple, as demonstrated by the low growth rate of density shown on the figure. However, thanks to their very long lifespans and excellent shade tolerance, red spruce saplings produced by the surviving trees survive on the underbrush beneath mature red maple trees, growing slowly while waiting for them to die to more minor disturbances due to their much shorter lifespans, before quickly growing much larger to fill the gap in the canopy. The population of these larger trees will then remain steady thanks to their lifespans and resistance to disturbance. These behaviors are all indicative of the red spruce being a climax species. Next, we determined how the population density of the red maple tree has changed over time. This change will then be interpreted to see if it fits the hypothesis stated in slide 4. As demonstrated by the graph, there is a weak positive relationship between current year and red maple density, allowing us to reject the null hypothesis and accept the hypothesis. Red maple trees that survive a destructive event like a hurricane disperse large quantities of seeds, which sprout and grow quickly to capture newly exposed growing space, explaining their rapid population growth in 2024 dominance. However, in comparison to climax species, their relatively short lifespans, shade intolerance, and vulnerability to disturbance means that red maple trees generally don't dominate in mature forests, usually being outcompeted by climax species like the red spruce. These trends are indicative of a subclimax species. This relationship between the two means that, while the red maple is currently dominant due to Point Pleasant Park still being early in the secondary succession process, it will likely not stay dominant as the forest approaches its climax community, with the red spruce instead establishing itself as the dominant species.
The forest community of Point Pleasant Park is in the early to mid-successional stage, and evenness will show a decrease in correlation to what is expected. The plot values showed high variability among samples, with some plots being and remaining more even, while others showed an increase in dominance. The figure illustrates change in Peeler's evenness, or J, in Point Pleasant Park from the year after the hurricane to 2025. Data samples were taken almost yearly from separate 400 square meter plots. Evenness showed a mild decrease over time, consistent with mid-successional development as competitive species such as red spruce and red maple increased and gradually reduced understory diversity suggested by Neely in 2011. Evidently, the trend line indicates that dominance is gradually taking place but not fully mature, and there's not a significant difference from when one first hit. Although the variation is high, shown by the R-squared value of 0.04, the negative trend is still meaningful. It shows that late successional process is taking place. In summary, the graph reflects what is generally expected and suggests a transition taking place towards a mature forest community, though at moderate speed. To conclude, our analysis indicates that the forest community in Point Pleasant Park remains in early to mid-successional stage. The patterns we observed, such as increase in total density, abundance of regenerating conifers, and strong early dominance, are consistent with what we would expect to see in Acadian forest after experiencing a disturbance. We have seen a decrease in species evenness. Richness, abundance, and density in conifers and ground floral species all steadily increased over time. Impacts of urban and natural occurrences may explain the slow transition to late successional stage. Balanced respect, reciprocity, and long-term responsibility are foundational Mi'kmaq values of traditional ideology. These, in combination with modern-day science, give a good foundation to take proper maintenance, like promoting ecologically valuable plants, as well as be careful monitoring and replenishing them where needed. This will help to promote forest health, growth, and recovery.
I would like to thank the professor of BIOL 2060, Rajesh, the coordinator and lab instructor, Joanna, and all 3 other members of my group who aided me in creating this presentation, and my colleagues who gathered the 2025 data used to construct the figures throughout the presentation. Thank you all for your contributions.
An article by the Climate Central states that the maximum wind speeds of 80% of the hurricanes from 2019 to 2023 have intensified by an average of 18 miles per hour and increased by approximately one category due to rising sea temperatures. Park pleasant management strategies should shift towards more climate-resilient practices to address this increase in hurricanes and intensity. High-risk routes should be regularly cleared and more tolerant trees should be planted to reduce large-scale blowdown risk. Living shorelines and cobblestone reinforcement should also be implemented to reduce erosion and dissipate wave energy. According to the Invading Sea, researchers found that living shorelines reduce wave energy and storm surges by 28%. These practices have been proven to help preserve pre-existing trees and reduce the level of destruction that hurricanes can cause. A standing storm response plan should also be implemented with emergency access preparation and rapid debris removal and post-storm ecological assessments to reduce the chance of secondary hazards. Also included should be a strong collaboration with the Mi'kmaq knowledge holders and community groups to support coordinated recovery and informed decision-making.
Being an urban park means that Point Pleasant Park is frequently visited by humans. Human presence has a variety of effects on the succession process, including trampling smaller pioneer species, polluting soil through litter, and potentially introducing invasive species through the forest through losing pets or planting foreign seeds. These can all disrupt and slow the succession process. Additionally, being in an urban area means that the forest is in close proximity to urban animals that would ordinarily not be found in a forest like Point Pleasant Park, which may further disrupt succession through predation or competition.
Seed dispersal. This is most often seen in birds and mammals. This helps succession by accelerating the dispersal of plant species into areas struck by disaster. Herbivory. White deer being a common consumer in Point Pleasant Park. Grazing pressure favors fast-growing pioneer species and prevents some mid-successional trees from establishing. Soil disturbances are created by earthworms and burrowing animals. The litter breakdown and burrowing changes nutrient and seedbed conditions, changing the overall landscape. Predation. Trophic cascades also play a role by mitigating consumers and manipulating the landscape's ability to grow.
So when a non-native species is introduced, whether it be intentional or accidental, they can outcompete native plants and animals, altering how Point Pleasant Park naturally progresses through succession. In Nova Scotia, invasive species are a major threat to biodiversity and ecosystem integrity. For example, invasive insects or plants may kill native species, disrupt soil and nutrient cycling, or prevent newer and younger native trees from establishing. These changes can slow the way succession occurs, leading to degraded ecosystems instead of returning them to the original native state. We see this in a study done 12 years ago at Santa Fe University, where Corneavaria have nearly replaced entire established populations of flora along the sand dunes of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. This local case shows us the impact invasive species can have on native species, and how something similar could unfold in Point Pleasant Park. Preventing invasions through detecting changes early and managing how species establish is crucial if we want to preserve biodiversity and allow natural succession of the park to proceed on its own course. Listed here are all of the resources and literatures that helped us conduct this study. We hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening.